there, my name is Renee and I am a good enough mom, and today I'm going to be sharing with you an honest review of the ACE or Accelerated Christian Education Curriculum. Like many families across the globe, we started homeschooling about a year ago when the pandemic and lockdowns were affecting our children's education, and we haven't looked back since. And I remember how important it was to me to have honest reviews about various curriculums that were not just based on marketing videos about the curriculum. And so this is one of the videos that I would have loved to have watched when I was looking for a curriculum for my family. So in this video, I'm going to be addressing many of the different questions I had with regards to homeschooling and the curriculum in different sections. For example, why did we start homeschooling? And why did we choose the ACE curriculum? What is expected of the child in the curriculum? What is expected of the supervisor in the curriculum? And a little bit about each different subject, some of the difficulties we experience. And each of these sections I'm going to be addressing in a different section of the video. So in the description, I'll put a timestamp for the beginning of each of these sections. So if you do not want to watch the whole video, you can just skip over to the section that you are interested in. And I hope that will help you. Let's begin. So, why did we start homeschooling? I must admit, the decision to start homeschooling did not start with the start of the pandemic or lockdowns or schools being closed. It had started a long time before that. We live in South Africa and our schooling system works so that our children go to one school for grade 1 till grade 7, and then in grade 8 they go to high school until grade 12. In our area we do not have an English high school. So my children have gone to a bilingual primary school from grade 1 until grade 7. But my daughter was in grade 7 last year and she would have had to make the decision about where to go to high school. She could have chosen to go to her second language high school, which is an Afrikaans high school, and the nearest high school in her second language is about 30 kilometers away. So she could either stay in the hostel, which I did not want her to do, or ride bus every day, leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning to get to school on time. Or she could choose to homeschool. I let this decision be completely her own decision, and she decided that she would homeschool in her home language rather than doing the schooling in her second language. So even if the pandemic had not happened, we would have most probably be homeschooling our oldest child at this time anyway. So now it comes to my second child. He is a boy in grade 5 and we had not been planning to homeschool him. But because of a variety of things that happened at the same time, we decided that homeschooling would most probably be the best option for him too. Firstly, my son is one of 2 English-speaking children in his class. So although the school is a bilingual school, I can certainly not expect the teacher to be speaking a lot of English in class if there are only 2 English children. Unfortunately, my son is not very good in his second language, so he was really struggling at school to be able to keep up with the work in his second language. And secondly, because of the pandemic, in order to maintain social distancing within the classrooms, they divided the classes in half and let the children come to school every second day so that there would be better space in between the children. This meant that one day they were at school and one day they were doing work at home. Trying to enforce any form of structure in a situation like that was really difficult, and I thought it would be much easier if we were just at home every day, and that will help us to really put our own structure in place to enable him to do his work properly. And seeing as I was going to be homeschooling my older child anyway, I might as well have him at home too. So why did I choose to use the ACE or Accelerated Christian Education Curriculum? Well, firstly, I wanted a set curriculum. I want a simple life, and I don't want to have to make curriculum choices the whole time and be second guessing myself the whole time whether I'm doing the best thing for my children. So I wanted a curriculum where everything was prescribed and was developed by knowledgeable people, and that I did not have to go out looking for the information. And ACE fitted the bill just perfectly for that reason. It covers all the subjects that I wanted my children to learn about, and it's done in small digestible bits and is really well presented and put together. And secondly, I didn't want to be teaching my children all day and then having to wait for me to teach them something first before they could continue with their work. I wanted them to work independently, and that is one of the beauties of the ACE curriculum. Everything is so beautifully presented that the children know what they need to do, and they are able to do it with very little supervision and assistance. There are times that they do not understand something, and then you would come aside them and assist them through that little piece of work. But for the most part, they are able to do all their work completely independently. Thirdly, I know that there are so many digital curriculums out there, but with my children spending a lot of time on screens anyway, I didn't want them to be on screens all day for their education as well. It was very important to me that my children need to read a lot. I wanted them to have a real book that they wrote in. This helps them to remember things far better than if they were to do it on a screen. My son is quite dyslexic, and I know the easy option would be to have a digital type of curriculum where he doesn't need to read, where everything gets read for him. But he's not going to learn to read well if he never practices reading. And so that's why I decided to use a very reading intensive curriculum to improve his reading rather than to adapt to his difficulty with regards to reading and writing. Fourthly, I chose ACE because they can really work at their own pace. They are not reliant on exam dates and needing to finish assignments by certain dates. They can finish them as quickly or slowly as they would like to. And we are not bound by any external person telling us how fast or how slow we need to work. I do prefer my children to work very quickly, but I want their work to be of excellent quality. And so this gives us the opportunity to make sure that the quality of their work is very good, but they can still complete the work faster than if they were waiting to hand their work in on a specific day sometime in the future. Although it was never a requirement to me that the curriculum that we chose should be a Christian curriculum, I am really glad it is. To me, I don't mind my children learning about what different people believe, what their values are, and how they differ from us. So it didn't matter to me if my children learnt other views in their education, as long as I can bring it back to what we believe as Christians. ACE is a very conservative Christian curriculum, and our family is a very conservative Christian family. And I am loving that their curriculum is drenched in scripture, that they are learning huge passages from the Bible daily, weekly, monthly, and that this forms the foundation of how they're going to go into their life in the future. But it is also important to me that my children should know what other people believe and to respect their beliefs. It's important to me to bring that into my children's learning curriculum, that we can discuss what other people believe and learn about what their beliefs are. And that I do separately from the curriculum, and that's fine to me. So, how does ACE work and what is expected of the child every day? Now at present I have two children using the ACE system, my daughter who is in grade 8 and my son who is in grade 5. So although I have seen the ACE curriculum for younger and older children, I haven't used it, so I can only give an honest review on the grade 5 curriculum and the grade 8 curriculum. Before you even start with the ACE curriculum, you first do a diagnostic test. Here they test for your child's maths ability, English ability, word building ability, and reading ability. This helps you to place your child on a level where they will benefit most, so that they don't have any gaps in their education, that they can do work that is challenging for them, but yet is still possible for them to be able to do. It makes sure that they have confidence in being able to go further with their work. So, for example, my children attended a bilingual school where their English was the minority language, so their English was a little bit behind in comparison to where they should be at their grade level. Also, our South African maths curriculum approaches maths very differently to the American maths curriculum. So there were a few things where my children had to catch up some gaps to be able to continue with the ACE work. Fortunately, this didn't take very long and they were very quickly up to the grade level where they should be. But if your child does struggle with their schoolwork, it may take some time before they can get to the grade level where they should be. But once again, the joy of this system is that there is no real grade levels or place where your child should be. It doesn't matter because they will be placed at a level that is right for them. That work that they will be doing will be challenging for them, but they will still be learning and be confident and be able to do it because it is at the right level for your child. So whether your child progresses quickly or slowly is dependent on your child's ability, and that is to me one of the beauties of a system like this. So the subjects my children do at the moment are maths, English, literature, Afrikaans, which is their second language, social studies, science, word building, and Bible. In the high school, my daughter also does EMS, or Economic and Management Sciences, and music. So for each subject, there are 12 little booklets called PACEs for each subject to be completed in a year. In order to be able to have holidays, it works well to be able to complete a booklet for each subject in about 3 weeks. When your child gets their booklet, the first thing that they need to do is they open it up and they need to read the goals of that booklet to their supervisor. This is the maths piece. So my daughter would read the goals to me before she can start, and then she gets to start her work. On each page is a description of what is required and then some exercises of what needs to be done. So it will be the same for all the different subjects. Here is a word building piece for the grade 5. So my son would first open it up, read the goals for this piece to me, and then he can start working. And he'll be able to continue working independently on his own. In order to be able to complete all 12 paces for these 7 subjects, it is usually necessary to do about 20 pages a day. Different children can approach these 20 pages differently. So some children can do 3 or 4 pages of each subject every day, or you can approach it differently. For my son, I find it works much better to only focus on 3 or 4 subjects at a time and rather do 6 or 7 pages out of each of those subjects every day in order to get to his 20 pages. ACE is really focused on the children working independently. So the children are supposed to make goals for what they would like to learn for that day. So each week they've got a goal sheet. On it they write their name and each of their subjects. So for each day they write in what their goals are for that day for that subject. So for example, for math, the child could say, today I want to complete pages 12 to 17, and they would write that in there before they even start. Once they have completed their work on Monday, they would cross out those pages on a Monday and then write in what their goal is for Tuesday. For example, if they finish up till page 17 on Monday, then they would say from page 18 to 24 for Tuesday. In that way, they would be encouraging themselves to work hard and do what they need to be able to do. So in each page, they first do some work for a couple of pages, where they learn some new information and they get asked questions about it. And then after about 10 pages, there is usually a checkup. A checkup is a review of the past few pages to make sure that they really understood what is going on. If they pass their checkup, then they can continue to the next 10 pages. So they'll do some work and learn some new skills and some more information and do some more activities. And then once about 10 pages are finished, they will come to the next checkup, which they'll do again. And once they've completed that checkup, they'll learn some more things and do some more activities and get to the final checkup. Then they've almost completed the entire book. So they'll review that book and then they get to do a self-test of the book. The self-test is a test of all the work covered in the book, and they need to be able to answer it without paging back in the book. They then go mark the self-test, and if they have got more than 80%, then they can do a PACE test. This happens the day after doing a self-test. The PACE tests are found in the middle of each book. So when you first hand your book to the child, you would take out their PACE test and keep it in a secret, safe place where they cannot see it. Once they've completed the book and completed the self-test and got 80% for the self-test, then the following day they get to do the PACE test. For most subjects, they need 80% to pass the PACE test. But for word building, they need to have 88% in order to pass the PACE test and go on to the next book. After reading the goals to the supervisor or their mom or dad, they can start their book. The first page is usually like a moral story or something really personal to help the child to develop their godly characteristics. And then after that, they start with their work. So for example, the child will first read through their work and then complete the questions. Once they complete the questions, it is not the parent's responsibility to mark their work. It is their own responsibility to mark their work. So they need to get up and go to a scoring station where they have a score key which they use to mark their work. So at the bottom here, they need to mark that they have marked all the work up to that place. If they made a mistake in the work, they then go back to their workstation and they correct that mistake. Once they have corrected all their mistakes, they need to go back to the score key and remark the score key. So they first score everything, they correct all the mistakes, and then they need to rescore everything. This makes sure that they really understand that the work that they've done in their book, that everything that is in the book is correct, that they won't be learning the wrong things. And even when they come to checkups, they also need to mark it themselves. Once they've marked their checkups and they have scored the page and then corrected the mistakes, they also need to reference the mistakes. So for example, if they got something wrong in the checkup and they go and find the correct answer, then they would underline it here and write checkup over here to say that they got it wrong in the checkup, and write the page here by the checkup to say where the correct answer is, so that they can remember it as a way to help reviewing the work for when they need to be tested on it later in the book. And the same with the self-test. If they make a mistake in the self-test, then they have to go and find the correct answer in the rest of the book. Underline the correct answer and write self-test over there, and write the page of the correct answer here by the self-test. This is a great way for reviewing their work before doing the PACE test the following day. In each book, they'll also be learning a Christian attribute, a godly characteristic that Christians should have, and how to develop them in their lives. So for example, this book is focusing on being available, and it has a little poem to go with it. Be available to lend a hand. There is something you can do and understand. Ready for the great and small. Ready when you hear the call. Be available for good. And then they learn a memory verse that has to do with that Christian attribute. The memory verse for this book is, He, Jesus, saith unto him, Follow me. And he arose and followed him. Matthew 9 verse 9. And now within the book, after every few pages, the child would also have to complete the memory verse. At first, just a few words of the memory verse will be left out, but by the end of the PACE, they will have to remember most of the memory verse and be able to say it orally before they can write the test. This is a great way for your child to learn many scriptures that will have great meaning for them in the rest of their lives. So what is required of the parent or supervisor? Now I've got 2 children and they are completely different, and my role in their schooling is also completely different. So let me start with my daughter. My daughter is a typical girl and she's a typical oldest child, so she's very diligent and does her work very well. So I have to do almost nothing. All I do with her is, at the beginning of each PACE, she reads to me her goals, and then I sign the bottom of the page. If there is something she doesn't understand, she first tries to figure it out herself. And if she really can't, then I will come to her and I will say, okay, read to me the book's explanation of what you should be doing. And then she will begin and she'll read, and often when she reads it out loud, it will click and she will understand what is required of her, and she'll be able to do the work herself. If it still doesn't make sense to her, then I would say, okay, let us go back a few pages, because maybe they explain it a bit better on one of the previous pages. And so we'll go back a few pages and we'll find where the gap is that she has, and then she'll be able to continue working on her own. So with her, once she's finished the book, I'll just go through the self-test and make sure that she really did understand everything that was required of her. And then I'll say, okay, this looks good. Tomorrow we'll do the PACE test. And the next day I'll give her the PACE test. I'll make sure that she can say her memory verse orally, and afterwards I will just mark her PACE test. And that is basically all the help that she needs, because she is a very independent worker. But for my son, it is completely different. So with him, we will also start, and he will read through the goals for me, and he will start working. Now, my son is a typical boy, and he has dyslexia, and his memory is not very good, and he doesn't have very good attention to detail. So when he is working, he will work, and he tries to work very quickly so that he doesn't have to work a lot. But then the quality of his work is not very good. So he would go and mark his work, but his attention to detail is not very good. So he will just say that everything is right, and he will continue. So what I've learned I really have to do is, once he's finished marking his work, I need to remark everything. So then I would take his book and I would remark everything, and then he would do the same process that he would have done if he had marked it himself. And once he has marked it, corrected all the mistakes that he saw for himself, then I mark it, and then he corrects all the mistakes that I noticed. And sometimes it'll take up to 7 times that I'll have to remark the page until he's managed to correct all the mistakes that were there on the page. This obviously takes a very long time and can be a little bit frustrating, but what I'm hoping is that over time he is going to learn that it will make so much more sense to do his work correctly the first time, not try and take shortcuts, notice the mistakes he is making, and in the future it won't take so long. So for my son, my supervisor's role is far more intensive and far more time consuming, and I think that just points to the fact that each child is different, and what your child may need might be completely different to what another parent's child may need, and each situation is very different, and you will have to see what works for you and your child. But even though my son does struggle a lot with many things, he is still able to do the work independently. He is able to understand what is expected of him. The books really explain it very well, that he feels confident when he starts a new page that he will be able to do it. With my son as well, because he struggles a lot with his memory, for certain of the subjects, for example social studies and science, where there is content that needs to be memorized and learned, then him and I would sit down before a self-test and read through the entire book. My daughter doesn't find that she needs to do it. She very seldom reviews her work before doing a test because it is still fresh in her mind. But I do find with my son it really helps to be able to get a fuller picture of the entirety of the book and remember the work if we read it together before he writes the test. There are also some admin related tasks with regards to being a supervisor. One of those is that you need to record the results of your children's tests. So for example, we've got a supervisor's progress chart. Here I write down all the paces that I expect my child to complete for the year, and then we write in the date that they completed the test for that pace as well as their results. The other thing that we need to do is just a short daily report of what happened every day, and for that we use the goal check report. And then for each subject, if the child happened to do a self-test or a PACE test, you would just write it in underneath that subject. Also, if they perhaps did any additional things, like for example, we need to record whether or not our children did any form of exercise, so I'd write in their extramurals in the comments below. Also, if their behavior was really excellent or really bad, you would also write that in over there. We also write in the scripture that they are learning for at that time and whether or not they were able to say it. Let's start with the maths curriculum. In short, I have loved the maths curriculum. The books are slightly longer than most of the other paces, with this grade 8 pace being 51 pages long and the grade 4 pace being 43 pages long. So they do take some time to complete, and one does maybe need to spend a little bit more time on maths and on some of the other subjects. I did make one mistake with regards to my son. When he completed the diagnostic test, what I did is I said he could use the methods that he had learned at school to complete the diagnostic test, which meant that he did really well in the diagnostic test, but that the method that they learned at school was completely different to the methods that are used in the ACE curriculum. So when he started with the maths, it was really difficult for him because he had to learn completely new methods, and perhaps I should have not let him use the methods that he had learned at school, but required him to do it the way that ACE teaches. So the first few books that he did with maths, he really struggled because it was a completely new concept to him. So that was my mistake. But apart from that, I find the maths curriculum really easy to follow. And it explains it really well before starting a new concept. It is explained very well. They really have a lot of focus on the terminology that is used within the curriculum, and to make sure that the children really understand what is being asked within a question. I find that there are enough examples to be able to complete the work that is required, that they have to do enough activities for each aspect before moving on to the next one, but that it is not so much repetition that the children get bored. After each section, they also ask word problems, and the word problems are really everyday type of problems to be worked out that really explains how can you use this concept in real life. So they are really applicable word problems to the children. I find the standard of maths really high, especially in comparison to what my children were being taught at school, that I really feel that ACE teaches them a wide variety of maths concepts that are of a high standard that will prepare them for any situation that they might face in the future, and that they might need to have a maths basis in order to work out that situation. The grading of the work that they do in the books is really excellent, that they explain concepts very well and move gradually onto more and more difficult concepts without letting the child feel that they are unable to achieve what's needed to be achieved. So I am really impressed with the maths curriculum. The next subject that I would like to speak about is English. Now, as I've mentioned before, my children attended a bilingual school in the past, and they were one of very few children in their class that were actually English speaking, and so they did not do a lot of English at school. Even though their home language was English, they were taught it at a second language level, and so their English was not at a standard that it should be for a first language English speaker. So both of my children had quite a few gaps that they had to do after doing the diagnostic test before they could get onto the standard where they should be. Because those books were meant for younger children, they were really able to speed through those books and yet learn the concepts that they had gaps on. I would really highly recommend filling in all those gaps before starting on the new work, because it is so well done and it gives your children such a sense of accomplishment. The ACE's approach to languages is very different from the approach that I was taught as a child, and it is also completely different to the approach that is taught to the children at the South African schools. And I am loving the way they approach English in this curriculum. My children are both more mathematically minded, and learning languages has always been a bit of a struggle because it feels so airy-fairy to them, and they don't understand why certain things are correct and why other things should not be correct. And ACE really manages to break language down in a way that is very understandable to a person that is more mathematically minded. It takes each concept and explains it very well before continuing to the next concept, and gives lots and lots of examples of how to integrate this concept into real language. It focuses a lot on sentence diagramming and understanding different parts of speech and different parts of the sentences. This is something that I never learned as a child, and my children haven't learned it before, and I think it will really help one to understand language in general and why certain things are right and other ways of saying things are wrong, and being able to approach language in a more structured way. I also love the way that each section is approached. They make a story about an activity. For example, here is an activity where the child needs to draw 2 lines under the action verb in each sentence. But they don't provide just a bunch of random sentences. It is the story of Zacchaeus. So the story starts like this, and this is the first sentence that they need to draw their 2 lines. Jesus passed through the city of Jericho, so they have to draw their 2 lines under the action verb. And then the story continues. Zacchaeus, the chief publican, lived in Jericho. And then the next question, Zacchaeus sought out Jesus. And the next question, Zacchaeus followed the large crowd. And I love the way they do this because it shows the children that there are action verbs in almost every sentence, and that they can look for these verbs in different sentences. It is not just a random bunch of sentences, it's a real story, and they get to learn the story of Zacchaeus in the process. So I love this approach to teaching languages. Often, for example, with a concept like action verbs, they will first identify it in these sentences, and then the next page will be, now write sentences with your own action verb. And so it really enforces the understanding of an action verb and helps you to implement it into your own English writings. And once again, here are sentences about state of being verbs, where they say identify the state of being verbs, and then on the next page you have to choose a state of being verb and write it into a sentence. And so I love the way that they teach you what something is and then help you to implement that into your own writing. As a Christian, learning English in this way will really help one to understand the Bible better. It'll help you to understand sentence diagramming, that if you're interested in learning the Greek and the Hebrew of the Bible, it'll really help you to understand all those different verbs and participles and things that perhaps I never learned as a child, and it'll help me to understand the Bible better because of learning English this way. So next up, I'm going to discuss my children's second language. And here in South Africa, the language that they're learning at the moment is Afrikaans. This is our second language, and it has been the language that they've been learning at school all this time. Out of all the subjects, I must admit Afrikaans is our least favorite subject. The books aren't nearly as colorful as the lovely American books that we have, but that is quite understandable. I find that the work isn't graded very well. I find my son in grade 5's work is very much on the same standard as the grade 8 work that my daughter does. So my son finds it really difficult and my daughter finds it really easy. What is expected is not so easy to understand. You would maybe complete a whole book, and then at the end you would find out, oh, but you were supposed to do a speech on that page, or you're supposed to have marked that page for marks, and it's just not always very easy to follow. Because it is a second language and not everyone speaks Afrikaans, the books also come with a CD or a USB, or you can download information so that you can watch short clips to help explain what to do in the book if the supervisor is not fluent in Afrikaans. There are also some spelling mistakes and things like that in the book. I find that the way that they ask the children to complete a lot of activities is very inflexible. They tell the children to write a story about a time that you went to the zoo, but then they give very specific way you need to write at the beginning of each sentence. which doesn't allow much creativity for the children, where I'd much prefer them just to write their own paragraph about them going to the zoo. There are also not a lot of examples in the book, so if the child doesn't understand what a certain things mean, it is very difficult for them to understand how to answer the question. What I really do like about this curriculum is that a lot of the articles that the children have to read are really about current affairs here in South Africa, or about real people living in South Africa that are doing phenomenal things. Sportsmen and women that are really well known across the world. So even though my children might not have known about them before doing the Afrikaans work, when they read about them, then they're excited to learn more about that person. It also speaks a lot about current affairs here in South Africa, so it really makes my children aware of what's happening around them and what's happening in the news at the moment. And so that's one thing that I really think they did very well, is that they made it very South African. So even though it is a language book, it is very interesting for the children to read, and that they are learning a lot about South Africa in the process. And here's one about different types of food that different types of cultures in our country eat. So it is really very appropriate for the children to learn. So although we will continue using the Afrikaans curriculum, I do think that this is one of the shortcomings that we are experiencing in our ACE curriculum at the moment. The next subject that I'd like to speak about is word building. Now, word building is actually spelling. So for each word building pace, the child learns a bunch of words. In grade 5, I think they learn around about 50 words per pace, and in grade 7 they learn around about 60 to 70 words per pace. These words are a combination of easy words as well as difficult words. There are some words that are used very often and some words that might be new to your child. Each book is often focused on a different rule for spelling. For example, this is learn the rule for the j sound of g, learn the rule for the j sound of d. So in other words, you get different sounds for different letters. This is also something that I was never taught as a child, especially not in this way, and my children are finding it very meaningful to learn the words like this. So they get to learn lots of different words, they get to know definitions of words, they get to learn dictionary skills, they improve their spelling, and that is one thing about ACE, is my children's spelling has improved so much because of a focus on spelling. In word building, you're required to get 88% in order to be able to pass one pace. And in all the other subjects, if you make spelling mistakes, you will have marks subtracted for those spelling mistakes. So it encourages children to improve their spelling, which here in South Africa is not really a focus of our education system. The next subject that I'd like to speak about is science. And once again, I love the science curriculum. They have grouped topics together, for example, aeronautics or elements of the periodic table or under the ocean. All different topics related to science and biology. At the beginning of every grade 5 science book, there's either a project or a science experiment related to the work that is going to be learned in that book. They also learn a lot of vocabulary and definitions of words to do with that concept. In this pace here, which is a grade 5 pace, the child is learning all about bees. Now in each of the books, there are many characters that play a role in teaching the children about different concepts. So this is a story about a boy called Pudge, which we meet often in all the different paces. And his experience with bees and all the things that he learns about bees, and in the process your child learns those things as well about bees. So usually there are pages that the child has to read through, and then they would answer questions about the work that they have learned in those pages. For each grade 9 pace, they work through the pace as well as doing a lab report, where they can watch different experiments or information that is presented on the internet and then complete an observation of what they have learned. I found the topics that have been covered in the science curriculum very interesting and of a very high standard, and I love the way that it's presented in a story form, especially with the younger learners, and more of the information form for the older learners, and very comprehensive for each subject that they have learned. The science curriculum of ACE is structured a little bit differently than the South African science curriculum. So the science curriculum from ACE would cover various South African subjects like geography, science and biology, each book focusing on one of those elements. ACE is a very conservative Christian curriculum, and so for example evolution is not taught in the science paces. This will obviously be a problem to some people. For our family it's not a problem because we believe in the 7 days of creation, that it was a literal 7 days, and so this curriculum suits our family's philosophy to life very well. Science is so broad, so the creation is not something that's hammered on throughout all the paces. If the pace has got something to do with aeronautics, then there's nothing mentioned about creation in there, or if it's got something to do with chemistry, it's not brought up the whole time. But if you're someone that believes in evolution, then you're going to have a problem with this curriculum. It suits our family well, but obviously it's not going to suit everyone. I love the way it's approached, that God is the creator of this world and that He has planned everything, and that the world is phenomenal in the way that it is planned, and that concept is just brought back over and over again through whatever science pace you follow. Next up, I'm going to be discussing the social studies curriculum. Now for South African students, the social studies curriculum covered two subjects which would be history as well as geography. So in order to comply to the South African government's requirement for schooling, ACE in South Africa has added a few extra books for the social studies curriculum and removed some of the American books. The reason being that a lot of the social studies curriculum is with regards to America's history and stuff, whereas the South African government would obviously like us to learn about South Africa's history and geography. So they have developed other books which look slightly different. They're not nearly as colourful and beautiful as the American books, but they are also very interesting, and they cover all the geography and history that the children would have been learning using the CAPS curriculum in a South African school. For some paces, the child would be completing an American pace, and other paces they'd be completing a South African pace, but it will still come up to 12 paces for a year for social studies. As with science, social studies usually begins with a project that the children have to do at home, often with regards to researching certain things. Then they learn some terminology, and they make sure that they understand some of the words that's going to be used in the book, and then it would start with information that is to be learned, and then the children need to answer questions about that information. I love the way with regards to history, they often make timelines at the top of the page so that the children can really understand where this information, where in history it happened, and how it compared to other historical activities that happened. As with all the subjects, the children will also be learning a memory verse for each book. Especially in the American books, in the middle of the book, the children also learn a lot of map study for America. So my children are learning all the different states in America, which they find really hard, but if you live in America, I'm sure that it's much easier for you. Another one of our favorite subjects is literature and creative writing. Now the books that my children have read this year have been absolutely phenomenal. They have loved their books, and I have loved their books. I have read every one of them, and they are really beautiful books. One of the complaints that my son has is, why does every book have to be so sad? And it is just lovely because these are books that he would never have chosen to read, and yet he has loved reading them. My daughter has also learned a lot from the books that she's read. They are more biographies and things, and they have been really interesting, and she's learned a lot through them. So the books that my son has learned in grade 5 this year is The Little Green Frog, Saved at Sea, The Red Rag Riddle, Charlotte's Web, Children's Missionary Library, and Choice Stories for Children, and all of these books have been absolutely lovely. And the grade 8 books that my daughter has read are Taylor Hudson, God's Adventurer, Little One Maid of Israel, When Science Fails, Abraham Lincoln, Anne of Ava, and In His Steps. And these have been very challenging books with regards to her faith, and have really focused on living life as a Christian and making a difference in the world. For grade 5, for each of the literature books, they complete 2 paces. And it is done very much in the same way as the other paces. You get to read a chapter and then you answer questions about that chapter that you read, and then you write a test about it at the end. For the grade 9 books, it works a little bit differently. For each book, they had a very small little pamphlet. This is for an entire book, and sometimes the book is like this and then the pamphlet is like this. So you just answer a few questions for each book and then write a short test at the end. So it's not nearly as much writing, but a lot more reading. But it has been very challenging with regards to faith and learning about people from history and just life in general and how to approach life. So we really enjoyed the literature books. Literature is one of the places where if your child is struggling a little bit and you're needing to make up for some time, that you don't need to complete all the literature paces. Here in South Africa, we just need to complete 6 of the literature paces for the year. Unfortunately, this is one of my children's favorite subjects, so they do want to do all of them. But if you're needing some extra time to focus on other subjects, then literature is one of the subjects that you can leave out some of the paces for. And the final subject that I'd like to discuss is biblical studies. Now here in South Africa, biblical studies is also one of the subjects that are not required if you don't want to do it. We did start with doing biblical studies, but when I saw that my son was struggling to complete all his work, I decided to let him leave biblical studies for now. My daughter first caught up all her gaps for the year and left biblical studies for a while, but now that she is all caught up and up to date, now she's starting to do the biblical studies as well. For biblical studies, you need a King James Bible. At first we thought, well, maybe we'd be fine with a different version of the Bible, but we saw that it is really tricky to answer these questions with different versions because it is very language specific. So you definitely do need a King James version of the Bible. It takes some time to do this. There's a lot of Bible reading and a lot of information. I think it is a great foundation for your faith for the rest of your life. If you are a Christian and you would like to learn more about the Bible, I would definitely encourage you, if your child is able to have time to do biblical studies, to be able to do it. It is really meaningful for them. It works exactly the same way as the other subjects, that they read passages from the Bible, there is explanation of those passages, and then they complete questions regarding to those passages. Every 10 pages or so they do checkups, and then the self-test and the post-test at the end of the book, like all the other subjects. The ACE curriculum is a very conservative Christian curriculum which suits our family very well, but I do understand that some people might not agree with what is taught in the biblical studies paces. So for myself, I didn't want to be trying to do this alone. I wanted to know that I've got a support system, that I can phone up someone if I've got a problem, and that there is a structure in place and that has been developed by people that are really knowledgeable and know what they're doing, and that I have full confidence in with ACE. Where we live, we've chosen to be part of an association where we get support. So anytime I can phone someone and ask for support. We've got a supervisor that comes to our home to check our children's work every term and to chat to me if there are any problems and to see if we're doing okay. And at the end of the year, I send the pace test that the children have done to be moderated to make sure that I've been marking them correctly and that my children's work are up to standard. Although I am an occupational therapist, I don't feel that I have got all the answers, that my children only need me to be able to grow. I feel that I don't need to know everything, that I can trust in a curriculum that is well structured and has been developed by specialists in their field. Before we started this curriculum, we did a 2-day-long supervisor's course so that I can know how to present the course so that my children benefit maximally from it. I'm someone that really likes structure, and so this works very well for me, that I can have confidence in the structure that has been put in place. So once a term, we also have an educators training day where our supervisor gets together a lot of the parents that also live in our area that are following the ACE curriculum to tell us about the latest developments with regards to the curriculum, small changes that are taking place, support services that are available to us. And this really provides a great support network for me, and I think that for myself it is something very important. We also get together regularly with other homeschoolers in our area that use many different curriculums, not just ACE. They believe in unschooling and using a lot of structure. So I've also got that support of other homeschoolers that are doing different things, and I think that is really important too. Each family is really different and each child is really different, and what you need from a homeschooling curriculum might be completely different to what we need from a homeschooling curriculum. But I hope this video today has really enlightened you to what ACE is, how we've experienced it, and maybe answered some of your questions. And you're welcome to ask some questions in the comments below. I promise I will get back to them. I must admit, I am not the perfect mom or the superwoman mom. I am just a good enough mom, and I don't get round to answering comments every single day, maybe not even every single week, but I promise I will eventually get to your comment and I will eventually answer it. And it is very important to me to answer each comment that is there. Just be patient with me. I will do it when I get a chance to do it. I do realize that each person's journey with regards to educating their child is different, and so I don't mean to be disrespectful to anyone's situation that is different to ours. I wish you all the best with regards to educating your child. So if we do things differently to the way you do it, please respect our way. It's working for us at the moment, and maybe we might change it in the future, but at the moment we are loving doing our schooling this way. And I hope that I've been able to answer some of the questions that you had, and that you might find it encouraging, and that you really find what God's will is for you and your child in your education journey. And thank you so much for joining me today. You're welcome to watch some of my other videos. They're mainly on all variety of mom type topics and homesteading type topics. So it's a great variety and mishmash of what our life really entails. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye.